Welcome Dr. Harold Hillman, and thanks for spending some time with us this morning before the 2016 Business Forum.
It's a pleasure to be here, Barbara.
Right. The 2016 Forum is all about connected intelligence. What does that mean to you?
It has the potential to be one of those words that doesn't mean a whole lot. To people it can mean a whole lot, but really doesn't. So it's a great question, and I'm glad that the conference is actually digging into it. Historically in organizations, we've often defined information flow as a vertical thing, even reinforced by this whole notion of corporate ladder. And organizations are just realizing now that that is antiquated in terms of how people need to connect now. The corporate ladder is slowly being replaced by what's called the corporate lattice. And the corporate lattice emphasizes relationships in all directions and growth and connections in all directions. So connected intelligence to me is putting the system together in conversations that enable us to make the best decisions, not only for the short term, but the long term as well.
So those conversations and that collaboration, how does that begin to work?
Well, a big part of it is, do we all see ourselves as leaders? And if we see ourselves as leaders, are we focused on the whole, or are we focused on the part?
So how can you start that sort of conversation?
You start those conversations at the top. Being in key leadership roles, in senior leadership roles, is very important to realize that the power of your behavior is far more significant than the power of your words. And so people do pay attention to what you do.
In your session, you're going to highlight the 7 key elements of authenticity. Out of those 7, which one resonates the most with you?
The one that I find probably the most compelling would be vulnerability. And vulnerability is a big mystical term that ultimately boils down to whether or not you're comfortable being imperfect. And even though that's just how human beings are, we're prone for our next mistake within the next hour or two. There is no perfect person, but some people really struggle with that. And it has an impact, particularly if you're a leader, if you don't let other people help. That's a big factor that sits under engagement. And that's why leaders really need to get their head around the importance of authenticity, and one of the major elements being vulnerability.
Can you give us a little snapshot of what we're going to hear about the other 6 as well?
There's something that we describe in common around authenticity, and those elements have to do with positivity. So there is a sense of sitting with a person who's constructive and wanting to look forward. There's a sense of being real, genuine, and not needing a decoder with others. There's that vulnerability that we talked about. And then there's an energy component, what I call a mutual energy, where when you're sitting with an authentic person, there's no need to try to sort of hold back who you are. So there's this ability to sort of build with. I call it reciprocal energy. There's an edge component. An edge is just being able to assert who you are, what you believe in a way that gets people's attention. And very often it's not necessarily that they have to agree with you, but they just sort of lean in a little bit more. Then there's that component quite closely related to that, which is disruptive. And there's just something about an authentic person, particularly in terms of being real and pushing into things that aren't working, that others might perceive to be a bit disruptive. And then finally, there's connectivity, and the sense that very often it's what the authentic person talks about or believes in that brings other people together, which is really important around the whole theme, of course, of connection. It's a vital component.
And are these just inbuilt, or can any of these be learned?
They can be learned. That's the beautiful thing about being human, is there are some who believe that we're hardwired to be a certain way. And what I would suggest to anyone is you can be who you want to be. Just depends on how motivated you are to change your style, particularly in a leadership role, where we're getting a better handle now around engagement. and we understand that engagement really is about helping people get connected and helping people think, open up the thinking in the organization rather than trying to control it and limit it. It's really opening it up. And when you get people engaged for their, particularly in terms of connectivity and collective intelligence, it is powerful.
One of the ones you mentioned was disruptive thinking.
Yes.
And that's not a negative at all, is it?
It isn't. It's what I say is when people ask me to define innovation, because that's another one of those words.
Yeah.
Everybody has a different definition for it. But when people ask me to define innovation, I just often say disruption. Think about disruption. Remember, what you do is more powerful than what you say. And so if you really do value innovation, then create a culture where people can push at, I call it the social order, how we do things around here, where people can start to push at it and actually are recognized for it and promoted for it.
Harold, innovation and collaboration. What does that mean for finance and business leaders today?
It's everything. It defines the difference between success and failure. With the compressed cycles of change in organizations, without innovation, without capital collaboration, all which really are components of leading change, you're not going to be successful. So these are no longer optional capabilities. Leaders have to be able to master what it really means when we say we value innovation and when we value collaboration. That's more than just words on a page or nice values in a plaque on a wall. That's culture, and that's really what it's all about in terms of success.
How would you encourage that? Encourage the innovation in the workforce?
So once you say that you are going to do something, people will hold you accountable to it. This is one of the reasons why it's important to just be explicit sometimes about goals that you have, because you have so many points of accountability out there. So be explicit about it. If you want to have an innovative culture, then talk about it. But get the attention of the organization. This is for real. This isn't just another initiative that's going to wash over.
And then people have to really understand what you mean by innovative.
That's
right.
That
it's the conversation,
big
it's
time.
The way you do things.
It's the way you do
innovative.
things. It is everything around how we do business around here. A disruptive, innovative culture requires us to get in there and shake up the thinking.
Okay, so going back to what you were talking about before about how leadership and how it can be learnt.
Yes.
What are some of the good attributes, or what makes a good leader?
We talk about it as emotional intelligence in leadership jargon these days, but a lot of it does reside under this construct of authentic leadership, and that is focusing on connections. We used to judge leadership effectiveness by virtue of what you did in the organization, so task focused, output focused. A lot of organizations now have put far more balance, if not more, weight around not what you do, but how you are in relationships and fostering that thing that we call engagement and connectivity. And a big part of it is, in that old world here, I was in control and I did everything. And in this world right here, you need other people.
Harold, based on all your research, what makes a great leader?
If I had to put it in a nutshell, Barbara, it would be emotional intelligence. What we used to consider to be nice to have and optional, now we know through a lot of research around engagement that leaders have to have the ability to engage with direct reports, with their peers, with partners around the business. This whole focus on relationships is no longer a nice thing to do if we have time. It's the essence of how business works these days, particularly in terms of information flow. So this whole theme around the collective intelligence, that's where it resides. It resides through emotional intelligence.
Right, going back to the connected intelligence
That's
theme,
right.
Why we've got the forum.
That's right, absolutely.
Going back to the leadership question again,
Yes,
there's the saying that you hear around the traps that everyone's a leader.
yes.
What's your take on that?
I believe that that is the case. I think leadership is a mentality. It's not about rank. And, in organizations, historically, we have made it about rank. And that is, I do the thinking because I'm a leader, and you do the doing because you're not a leader. That's a precarious business proposition in any organization when you tell the great majority of the workforce to turn their thinking off, Leadership is a mentality, and that is I have a personal responsibility to push into things that are holding the business back. There are ways to do that, particularly in terms of, particularly around teams, collectively being able to do that. But every single individual should really walk through that door every day with the idea that I'm a leader in this organization, and I have a responsibility to lift my hand and point out anything that I think is getting in the way of us being successful.
So Harold, as well as working with a number of individuals, you also work with organisations and their lead teams.
That's right, yes.
So if you went into an organisation and was working with a lead team,
yes.
How would you know you'd been successful?
I will know that I have been successful working with a team when they don't need me anymore. So my role, I say that, I'm quite explicit with leadership teams. My role is to make sure that you don't need me in a bit of time, and I want to get you all across the idea that you own so I call it the health and well-being of a team. So that's my sign of success, that a team has gotten itself quite capable around being able to put its dynamic, how it operates, whether or not it's focused on the right priorities, all of those things on the table in a way that fosters greater communication and candor, as opposed to closed and controlled communication and those types of things. There is this sense of connected intelligence across a leadership team. That's when it's time for me to exit.
Now, will that leadership team know when they've reached this pinnacle, or would you have to say, you're there, I'm not needed anymore?
The results speak for themselves. And so what I just described, particularly with respect to being able to lead the enterprise together versus as a series of functional experts, makes a big difference on performance. That's what differentiates good companies from high-performing organizations, good to great. And that factor of great is associated with very strong leadership teams that take that as a real responsibility.
Harold, can you finish this sentence for me? You want delegates to come out of your session at the 2016 Business Forum with what?
With a much better definition and understanding of what authenticity is. I want to demystify authenticity. People think it's rare. People believe that it's something that only great giants and heroic people can do. I want to demystify authenticity and bring it down to the you and me, the average person sitting out there who goes to work each day trying to do their best and understanding that we all can be authentic people to others around us. And I want to demystify that.
Thanks for joining us this morning, Harold. It's been great talking to you, and I look forward to meeting up with you again at the Business Forum.
It's been my extreme pleasure, Barbara. I'm looking forward to the conference.
And I'm looking forward to seeing you at the conference as well.
Thank you.